AFA Streaming offers free and subscription video content. Titles like By Design, The God Who Speaks, and Asbury Revival, Desperate for More. You'll also find video versions of AFR programs. Visit afa.net and click on Streaming. Welcome to Today's Issues, offering a Christian response to the issues of the day. Here's your host, Tim Wildman, President of the American Family Association.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network for this Monday, April the 1st, 2024. Joining me in studio is Ed Battagliano. Good morning, Ed.
Good morning, Tim.
Fred Jackson.
Good morning.
So have you had any pranks played on you yet this morning, or have you dished them out, Ed?
No, we don't have any kids in the house, that are young that you can prank easily. I used to love taking advantage of my kids when they were young.
Sure,
and
as every parent does.
And trusted me, and then I could tell them, things, and they would be, just bewildered or whatever, and I'd say, April Fool's, gotcha. So, that's...
Yeah, that's yesterday.
That's yesterday. It's sad that I try fooling my wife, but she knows me so well.
Tell us a marble story.
The
marble. Do you mind doing that?
No, I don't mind. No,
I'm springing it on you. This is speaking of yesteryear.
Yes, we were talking this morning about April Fools and in one of our meetings, and so I related this story when I was probably 8 or 9 years old, maybe 10, and I was the older. I had two sisters, and we decided to go all out for April Fools, and it was a Saturday. April 1st fell on a Saturday, so it was all day long, one prank after another, beginning with what we did to my mom. My mom was always the first one up. She'd go down. She'd fill the kind of the hot water kettle to make coffee. Well, I got up really early and put some black electrical tape on the handle of that little hose for the sink. So when she turned the water on, she first thing in the morning got doused with water. And
your own mother.
My own mother, and one thing after another. And finally, my dad got tired of it, and it was after supper, and he's former Marine. He got
He went full Marine on you.
He went full Marine and said, "No, this is it. With no more April Fool's jokes. That better be it." Bop, 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 bop. And he was going upstairs to bed just an hour or two later, and I forgot that I had put marbles in his bed early on to get him before he went to bed. And I forgot until they had hardwood floors. He went upstairs, and I could hear the first marble, and one marble after another dropped out of that bed. And I froze. I expected my dad to come flying down and throw me outside or something, that kind of thing. But he never said a word, He just yelled down the stairs, "Edward, come up here and get these marbles." So I had to go up there and get all those marbles.
Edward, though?
Edward. So, but that chill that ran down my spine when I heard that first marble drop.
Had you forgot him?
I had forgotten that I had done it.
You'd done so many pranks during the day.
So many, and he goes upstairs. I thought, well, I guess I went 2 steps too far, and then I heard those marbles start to drop.
Oh, no. Yep. Oh, my word. Okay.
See, we had a rule in Canada that April Fool's jokes had to end at noon.
And
I don't know where that came from.
My dad, I think.
You had to you had to get it out of your system by noon, or it didn't count anymore.
Mm.
Yeah.
I think the best April Fool's jokes probably work about 7 o'clock at night because everybody thinks it's over.
Right.
And then you spring it on them. Right. I'm just not good at doing pranks like that because I'm always afraid somebody will have a heart attack or something in response to them, or get injured.
Yes.
And it's like, okay.
Yeah, those are the ones you really never live those down.
Right. All right. Listen, next hour, our own John Riley, who just returned from, 10 days or so.
Yeah, about that.
In Israel?
Yes.
On the ground, reporting in Israel. and he's going to come in. He joined us once from the Holy Land, and on this show last week, and he's going to be on live in studio. He's returned now to the States, and he's going to talk to us in an hour from now about his journey, about his trip, what he saw,
Who he interviewed.
Fred, in fact, there's some protests going on in Israel from citizens, right?
Yeah, according to various news reports, thousands of Israelis took to the streets in Jerusalem yesterday. Some of them were
Tel Aviv and Haifa.
Yes.
So they had demonstrations across the country.
Across the country. Some of the demonstrators, according to reports, were families of hostages
Right.
still being held. It is a tense time in Israel. For the most part, according to polling and according to Prime Minister Netanyahu, the country is still behind him overall in his war against Hamas. That is in place. But they believe more could be done to get the release of the hostages that are still being held, more than 100, and also the bodies of those who are the deceased hostages. They believe there are at least 30 or so of the hostages who have passed away. So, but what many people believe is that a surrender, a ceasefire, an extended ceasefire right now would give Hamas exactly what they want. And they would regroup again. You know, you can understand if you're a family of a hostage, you want that family member home. Do whatever you can, whatever has to be done to get those family members home. But when you back away, the larger picture of all of this is that you can't stop now. In fact, it's very interesting. Right now, there is a story out there that the campaign that Israel's had, a specific campaign of the war against this hospital, and you've probably heard of this large hospital, Shifa Hospital. Israel has backed away from there. But the former Israeli Prime Minister Bennett reported this morning that in that operation, now this is at this hospital, 200 Hamas terrorists were killed. 500, Israeli army took 500 into custody. And according to the former Prime Minister Bennett, not one civilian was killed in that operation.
That's extraordinary.
But think about those numbers. The mainstream media, for the most part, is all they focused on, Israel's attacking a hospital again.
Right.
Israel's attacking a hospital again. But 200 Hamas terrorists killed, 500 taken into custody, all in that hospital operation, which just goes to confirm how Hamas operates there.
Right. Because, as you said, the mainstream media is focused on Israel's military actions against a hospital,
Yes.
but Hamas is using it as a headquarters. And if Hamas cared about civilian lives,
Yes.
which is what they pretend,
Mhm.
then they wouldn't be at a hospital.
Yeah.
They'd be fighting on the open battlefield, but they don't want to do that because public opinion in terms of the world-wide community and the use of hostages as bargaining chips and ways to extend the war or gain an advantage is the way this particular terrorist group operates.
Yes.
This is going on. This coming up on 6 months.
It is since October the 7th. And increasing pressure Israel is facing from the United States. Former Secretary of State under President Trump, Mike Pompeo, was on Fox just a few moments ago. And he says, you know, Israel, despite all of the opposition, the United Nations, etc., has got to stay the course on this. Cut 8.
The fight is not over. Hamas is not yet defeated, and that is the central task. If you're going to get hostages back, the only way to do it is to put pressure on Hamas and pressure on Iran. Those are the two pinch points. They're the decision makers for releasing these hostages, and anything else will just show weakness. There'll be more hostages taken. We shouldn't forget, we watch these protests, and we sometimes here at home forget there's Americans that continue to be held there, and putting pressure on Hamas, not letting UN resolutions pass that call for ceasefires. That's a U.S. mistake. Not allowing Hamas to confiscate food that's being delivered there and use it for their own purposes. Those are the things that encourage Hamas to continue their war. They need to be defeated, Bill. That's the only answer to getting these people home.
Well, that's former Secretary of State Mike Pompeo, who served under President Trump. You know, this is the difficulty, for lack of a better word, that Israel faces is that the enemy doesn't wear uniforms.
Right.
The enemy is a terrorist organization who mixes in with the general population, and that's and the world. Much of the world gets angry with Israel for firing upon and sending soldiers into areas where civilians live. Well, the civilians are mixed in with Hamas. And so, can you imagine how hard it is to say every step of the way, we must be so careful as to not kill any civilians or innocent people, all the while looking for an enemy hiding behind, a building or in a tunnel. You know what I'm saying? And then you make one wrong step, boom, then the world condemns you. It's a very precarious war that they are undertaking in that sense. It's almost like urban warfare, but it is urban warfare, I guess. So Israel also is thinking to themselves, well, we don't want our soldiers to get killed either. I mean,
Right.
so we got to watch out for them. So do we send them down a tunnel?
Right.
Do we send them into here, or there, or the other? If we do, we better be sure that they're going in after the right targets. So, in that sense, it's a no-win situation. And also, I was going to I tried to explain this last week with respect to the Gaza Strip, which is where this is going on. Imagine, let's just use the state of Florida for example. Let's just say that the Gaza Strip is the state of Florida. What Israel's done is they have won the war all the way down to Miami. Okay, they've cleaned up down Florida, which is Gaza, let's say, down to Miami, and now a lot of people who are refugees, a lot of people have been condensed into a small landmass that were otherwise in the other part of Florida. They were in Orlando and Jacksonville and Panama City. Well, now they're all down in the Fort Lauderdale, for the most part, Fort Lauderdale, Miami area. And now Israel's trying to decide, do we go into Miami, Fort Lauderdale, and try to clean this up with all these people? And
Right.
many of them are hungry and they're desperate and they don't have their way of life has been upended. And don't get me wrong, I'm not exonerating them of responsibility because they supported Hamas. But the 7-year-old child doesn't
Right.
know what's going on.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? So you do have a humanitarian crisis. But so the dilemma that Israel faces is, do we continue on knowing that a lot of people who aren't combatants are going to be killed, and we're going to get blamed for it? You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, and this is the way it's called, asymmetrical warfare. This is what you do if you're a terrorist organization and you know you can't get on. I'm just speaking like this. I think people understand what I'm saying. You can't get on the same battlefield with the Israeli Defense Force. You're just not going to last. And these groups like Hezbollah in Lebanon and Hamas in the Gaza
They use
Strip,
guerrilla warfare.
that's their only option. And you toss in the use of hostages. You get into large groups of civilians, because your hope initially, I think they were hoping to drag the rest of the Muslim world into a war against Israel. I'm talking about Syria, Iran, maybe even
Turkey.
Egypt. Yeah, Turkey. I think they were hoping to do that. Now they are hoping to survive. I think Hamas is. That's why they're trying to string this out. The people who are sympathetic, and there's more of, I'll be honest, there's more of the more than I thought there'd be. People who'd be sympathetic to Hamas and more generally to the Palestinian cause. Now you're just trying to get them to operate in the United Nations, so on and so forth, to get Israel to back out so that Hamas can survive to do this again in 5 years.
Mm-hmm. Anyway, it's causing some turmoil inside Israeli politics with Benjamin Netanyahu and a lot of the family members and those who support the family members of the hostages are obviously frustrated. They've been wanting their loved ones to come home. If they don't even know if they're still alive or not.
Right.
So a lot of them are blaming Netanyahu for not being able to get the hostages back by now. Right or wrong, they're blaming him.
Plus, I would say this: I don't know how many. Do you know what the population is of Israel?
I'd like to say around. Is it 8 million?
Yeah, 9 million, 9 million.
So you can get thousands of people to show up for a protest.
Yeah,
it looks huge,
right? But is it really representative?
But is it really representative of the vast majority?
John Riley will know that.
Yeah, but it doesn't really matter for the purposes of television and social media.
That's true.
And for the opinions on the world stage. So these kinds of things make politics and war very tricky business.
Is God on Israel's side, Ed?
Well, I first of all, I'm not going to speak for God in specific instances. My belief is that God is still going to keep his promises to the Jewish people and to the nation of Israel. But I'm not going to say God is in favor of Netanyahu's strategy in this particular part or phase of the war.
Gotcha.
I sometimes don't even know what God's opinion is of my life, but so generally speaking, I believe God will preserve the nation of Israel.
Right.
But as far as, specific policies on the part of Israel, I don't know.
But we do have historical evidence since Israel was reformed as a nation in 1948, when those Muslim nations surrounding Israel have attacked. God has been shown his miraculous force in defeating the enemy.
Yes.
When Israel didn't even have weapons. They didn't have
Right.
an air force to begin with. But God intervened.
Yes.
In that. And
you hear testimonies of Jewish Israeli soldiers saying, I don't know how this happened.
Yeah.
Israeli tanks, enemy tanks being abandoned because they thought that the enemy was behind them.
Yes.
So,
I'm not going to, what I'm about to say is not, it's just a thought, okay? But Alice and I were talking the other day, my wife, and you remember it was either the day or the day after that the United States refused to support Israel in the UN. You remember this?
when they had stained in the Security Council, you mean?
It was either that day or the day after is when that ship hit the bridge and the bridge collapsed and upended a major port in America, and is going to cost billions and billions of dollars. Okay, so we were talking about how many times in history when America had dissed Israel,
Mm-hmm.
and something terrible,
Yes.
on a big scale happened
Yes.
that day or the very next day.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I'm just throwing that out there for what
Right.
it's worth, but that is a provable.
It'd be interesting to track some of that.
Yeah, I've seen those. I've seen that. Have you seen that before? I
Yeah.
can't recite it verse by verse right now, but
There was a case. I think it was at the time when Israel was under pressure to basically hand over Gaza to Hamas. Was it 2005?
2005.
George
2007.
W. Bush was president at the time. Israel faced a lot of pressure. Two-state solution. Everything will just be fine if you just hand over. Israel forced its own citizens out of Gaza. I think there was a hurricane shortly after that.
yeah.
It devastated America. So I think there is truth to what you're indicating there.
Well, I've seen that before, that chart of things that have happened to the U.S.
Yeah.
2005.
That was Hurricane Katrina, right?
It was September 2005. Israel's final withdrawal from the entire.
Oh,
Gaza
when they
Strip.
withdrew from Gaza.
Yes.
Okay, okay, yeah. Yeah, I remember that when they pulled their people out of Gaza. They pulled the Jews out and gave it all to the Palestinians. It upset a lot of Israelis who had homes there.
Yes.
and we're living there.
Yes.
All right, you're listening to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. Anyway, we'll talk to John Riley, who just got back from Israel. We'll talk to him at the top of the hour. Next story, Fred.
Well, the other big story that was in the news during the weekend, the Easter weekend, the Biden administration was sharply criticized. Yesterday, March 31st, was Transgender Day of Visibility. And
It was what?
Transgender Day of Visibility, March 31st.
It is every year that year, right?
It is
that day.
on
Okay.
that date. But it fell on Easter Sunday, one of the most important days, some would argue the most important day of the Christian calendar. And I think folks were upset because so much attention of the White House was given to that and very little attention given to the fact that this is such an important day for Christians. Among those who criticized the White House, Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn, one.
I think everyone should be insulted by this, the intentional nature of this. Easter is a religious holiday. It is such a sacred day where we all meet at the cross. And for this White House to declare it, to issue a proclamation for Transgender Visibility Day, and then at the same time to deny the use of religious symbols in the White House Easter egg hunt art competition. Think about that one. They are insulting every Christian who holds this day as a sacred day.
Listen, Biden claims to be a Christian. That's what he said yesterday.
And he, I think, regularly attends Mass.
Yeah.
He's supposed to be.
I've never heard his testimony. Has anybody ever heard Biden's personal testimony?
Nope.
Have you, Ed?
I think he said that he was there on this at the Sermon on the Mount. I think he said, didn't he? Didn't he say that? He said I walked that road to Emmaus.
You know, the sad thing about it is I wouldn't be surprised if he did say that. Huh?
No, I've never heard him talk about
his conversion.
Yeah.
I've never heard him. He'll say he's a Catholic and he goes to Mass but I've never heard him say, you know what, Jesus Christ is my Lord and my Savior, and He changed my life, and I want to tell you about it. I've never heard him say that.
Nope.
I've never heard Trump say that either.
Right.
For that matter, former President Trump. So,
Listen.
if I can hear a personal at some point, now I will say this: even non-Christians leaders can commemorate a religious holiday of all kinds. Okay, so I know that former President Bush, he recognized Ramadan because so many Muslims, in the U.S. and around the world. So there's nothing necessarily wrong with recognizing a religious holiday of another sort.
As a political leader.
You're the leader of all the people. So there's nothing wrong with saying, hey, if you're a Christian president, to say, Happy Hanukkah, or we wish the Jews in the U.S. A Happy Hanukkah. See, nothing wrong with that. I just never. But if I don't hear to me more than let's think about the big man upstairs kind of stuff, then I doubt their salvation.
Yeah.
Because you have to have a story. You have to have a moment in time when you say, you know what, I surrendered my life to the gospel of Christ because it's because the Bible teaches you're not saved by your grandparents.
Right.
Okay. It's each individual must give their heart to Jesus Christ. Repent of your sin, give your heart to Jesus Christ, trust in the Lord for salvation. And I just like Biden, I've never heard that. It was, I'm a good Catholic. Well, what does that mean?
Right.
You know what I'm saying?
Well, let me just say, take a different tack here. I think it was good that the president had Transgender Visibility Day yesterday because you hardly ever see them, transgender people. They're never on beer commercials. They're never on. You never see them at libraries.
You never hear about them.
It's my turn.
Here is your host for My Turn, Don Wildman.
Some things in life are terribly expensive. For instance, Lawrence of Arabia's book entitled The Mint was published after his death in 1935. But because he requested that it be withheld from the public until 1950, only 10 copies were printed with a price tag of $500,000 per book. Can you imagine that? $500,000 for a single book? Most complete libraries aren't that expensive. Yet there are things even more expensive than that. Luke, the physician, records one in the scripture that we read. He steadfastly set his face to go to Jerusalem. That was far more expensive. It meant his life. The entry of Jesus into Jerusalem was indeed a simple but dramatic scene. Jesus was hailed as Lord and Master by those who loved him. But in the background were those who waited for a chance to put him to death. This tense situation was no accident, for great events are made by great decisions. Jesus was fully aware of the danger at hand. It was a difficult decision that lay behind the Palm Sunday event, but he made it without wavering. A crisis was at hand in his ministry, and he met it magnificently. His decision marked him as much more than a gentle doer of good. It showed Jesus to be a man of great courage, strong convictions, and resolute determination. We today could use a little more of those qualities ourselves. Great courage, strong convictions, and resolute determination. Most of us have them until it means that it will cost us something. Most of us are strong with our belief until we have to lay the cards on the table and a showdown is called for. Then we shy away, timid in the faith that once made us strong. Why is it that it happens this way? Simply because we haven't anything to begin with. We want to see right prevail. We want to see the gospel alive, but we don't want to get involved. Apathy is a good word for it. Most of us, if faced with the decision that Jesus was faced with concerning the entry into Jerusalem, would have said, let's go around and avoid the trouble. It does cost us, at times, to be Christian, especially when it's time to stand up and be counted. Times of decision show us up as perhaps nothing else can. They separate the weak from the strong, the little from the big, the cowardly from the brave. Decisions are always before us. Shall it be the way of ease, escape, personal gain, and pleasure? Or shall it be the way of honor and sacrifice, love and duty? Such decisions can't be sidestepped. The hour does come. If we don't decide, the decision is made for us. Time never stands still for our convenience. Either we face toward Jerusalem or turn away from God. And only as we decide for God can we live on good terms with ourselves and our Master. Yes, you see, some things are terribly expensive. Not only were there 10 books with a price tag of $500,000 each, but there was a decision made to face Jerusalem that cost his life. But what other decision could he have made and still have been true to himself and his God? There are times when to make a decision for the right is going to cost you something. But we'll never learn to live until we find something worth living for, and then stand solid on that, whatever the cost. Have you found it yet?
This has been My Turn with Don Wildman, a production of the American Family Association.
Search me, God, and know my heart. Test me, know my anxious thoughts. See if there is any offensive way in me, and lead me in the way everlasting. Psalm 139, verses 23 to 24.
American Family Radio. This is today's issues. Email your comments to comments@afr.net. Past broadcasts of today's issues are available for listening and viewing in the archive at afr.net. Now, back to more of today's issues.
Welcome back, everybody. Tim, Ed, and Fred. Ed, tell people how they can watch us on what you affectionately call that there internet.
Well, you have 3 options. We do have a live video stream of this program during the show. And so you can catch that 3 different ways. You can go to our own streaming service, streaming.afa.net.
And we created that just for you people.
Yes.
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Yeah,
Stream.
and so streaming.afa.net, you can catch the live video stream. There's 2 other ways you can go. If you want to go to the pagans in order to watch it, you can do that. You can go to either Facebook or YouTube, and you can search for today's. That's right, be a witness on there. You can just search for today's issues on YouTube. It's Today's Issues Live. We are now also live streaming American Family Radio on X, formerly known as Twitter. And for that, you do have to search for American Family Radio, and then you'll catch whatever program is airing the video stream live at that time.
Hey, I know that I don't know how many of you follow college athletics, but in the women's basketball tournament, the NCAA women's basketball tournament, they're and the men, they're down to the men are down to the Final Four. You got NC State, Alabama. Alabama's making their first appearance in the Final Four ever.
Wow.
You know, so basketball's getting a little love, right? And then you got Purdue, and they've got this 7'4" giant who's an outstanding basketball player. Of course, he scored like 40-something points yesterday against Tennessee, I think. And then you've got UConn. So you've got a good geographical, dispersion.
This is for the women or the men?
Men. You got UConn, University of Connecticut.
Because the UConn usually has an excellent women's team.
They do? Yeah. They're a basketball school for sure. You never hear about them in football,
right.
UConn. But so it's UConn, Alabama, Purdue, and who was the other one I said?
Did you already say NC State?
NC State.
Yep.
Yeah, NC State's a Cinderella team because they're like 11th seed. They lost 14 games in the regular season.
Wow, and they made it to the Final
Four.
Four.
They're the team going to the Final Four with the most losses ever in the regular season, which only proves you just need to get hot for 4
right
games.
Time. That's true about just about any sport.
Yeah, you need to get hot at the right time.
Right.
But anyway, on the women's side, the reason I bring all this up on the women's side, there's 2 more spaces to be. I think NC State and NC State, they may be going to the Final Four in the boys and the girls because I think they beat Texas yesterday. In NC State did, and then they got South Carolina. They won yesterday. They're undefeated, but I say all that to say this. Am I right about NC State beating Texas in women's?
They did. They beat the number 1 Texas Longhorns 76-66.
Okay, so NC State's going to the Final Four in men's and women's. I don't know if that's ever been done. Maybe UConn did that. Probably UConn did that. Anyway, here's the point. Tonight there's 2 more places left for the women's Final Four, and tonight is a epic clash between last year in a rematch of last year's national championship game, LSU and Iowa. And LSU won the national championship last year in women's basketball over Iowa in a dramatic fashion. But so they're saying that tonight's LSU-Iowa matchup may be the most watched women's basketball game in history.
I'll probably watch that tonight.
Yeah.
Since you said that.
Well, they've got Iowa's got that Caitlin Clark.
Oh yeah, that's right. Because there was a big dust up last year
between her and LSU's Angel Reese.
One of them held up a hand in her face
or
something.
Yeah, but I heard her commenting yesterday. Angel Reese of LSU. She's the one who held up her finger in Caitlin Clark's face and said, I got the ring and you didn't, basically, which I think is terrible sportsmanship.
Right.
But she goes, she said, we like each other. We're friends off the court. Just when we get on the court, it's intense.
And highly competitive people, that's the way it is.
Yeah.
Doesn't matter if it's a family member.
Larry Bird.
Yes.
Larry Bird was good friends with a lot of people, but he trash-talked them on the basketball court.
One of the worst ever.
But as Yogi Berra said, it ain't bragging if you can back it up.
Yes,
right?
That's right.
But anyway, so tonight, Caitlin Clark, she averages like 30 points a game. She's like a phenom. She set the all-time NCAA women's and basketball scoring records. Anyway, it's just going to be a big-time matchup tonight between the LSU women and the Iowa women, led by Caitlin Clark. Ironically, Caitlin Clark set the NCAA record for scoring, and the person that that's men's and women's, the person that she moved ahead of was Pistol Pete Maravich.
Really?
Yeah. Who played his basketball at?
LSU, wasn't it?
Yeah, college basketball. Isn't that
Yeah.
ironic? With a capital I?
And he, I think, had, I don't know if it was college or pro, but it's probably college. I always thought that he would never be surpassed. Maybe his points per game will never be surpassed.
It won't be.
It was like 40-something points a game average.
Without the three-point
yes, that's
shot.
right.
Or the shot clock.
True.
I mean, so there'll never be another Pistol Pete Maravich as far
Right.
as scoring. Now, she overcame him, but that was in 4 years. He did his in 3 years. I'm not taking anything away from her.
Right.
She's probably the best.
You're putting it in perspective.
She's the greatest female basketball player ever in college, if you
Right.
go by scoring.
Right.
That would be true. But anyway, it's going to be a phenomenal matchup tonight. You're listening to Today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. Next story, Fred.
I was just watching some breaking news out of the Middle East. Prime Minister Netanyahu of Israel has said all along they are ready to fight this war on multiple fronts, multiple sites. And we're just getting news from Fox that Israel has struck an area in Damascus near the Iranian embassy there, apparently targeting.
That's in Syria.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes. And apparently inside the Iranian embassy in Damascus, Israeli intelligence found out there were Iranian military leaders there.
I have no doubt. First of all, usually the Israeli intelligence agency is unparalleled. Nobody's better.
Yes.
Maybe others they're equal, but
Mhm.
but also Iran has set its course to try to dominate the Middle East.
Yes.
I have no reason to doubt that that's true.
Yeah.
Let's face it, Israel and Iran are at war. It's Hamas has its own cause, so to speak, but they're financially supported, everybody says, by Iran.
And so
is
is
Hezbollah on the north, who are in Lebanon and I guess Syria too. But Damascus is a city in another country, and Israel has launched a bomb.
Fox News was just reporting.
Has bombed Damascus.
Airstrike, yes.
Well, they must have thought it was extremely serious.
Well, Netanyahu has said all along that really the Iranians are running this war, and if you're going to ultimately stop this, you have to stop Iran. So this is a signal this morning that Israel is ready to hit hard at Iran directly.
And Biden was the one who gave Iran all the money, right? Remember that?
Oh, yeah. Well,
he turned around all the.
He ended sanctions against Iran.
That President Trump had in order.
Yeah, Obama gave them literally
boatloads of cash, plane loads of cash.
Yes, and now and you're right about Biden. He ended some of the sanctions because the Iranians made a promise that they would not develop their nuclear weapons.
Yeah,
and that they wouldn't use money for anything military.
Yeah.
And you know, you got to take them.
You got to trust them all.
You got to trust them all.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. The same ones that they say they want to destroy the little Satan and the great Satan.
Yeah.
The little Satan in Israel is the big Satan is the U.S.
Yes. Yeah.
All right, your next story, Fred.
Well, back here at home.
Meanwhile, back at
yes.
home.
Back here in the U.S. of A., New York's Governor, Democrat Kathy Hochul, over the weekend decided she would like to go to the funeral of a murdered New York police officer. Jonathan Tiller was his name. So she goes to the funeral. You may have seen this video. She shows up at this funeral, and she is encountered by a police union person We do not hear the conversation, but it is animated. And the belief is that this police union official said, we don't want you here. This is not a place for you. Because Hochul, like many Democrat governors, have taken on police forces, have dissed police forces. New York Police veteran detective Allison Esposito on Hochul being turned away from this funeral. Cut number 4.
And I watched her stand there, a hero in her own right. She made an impassioned plea to the elected officials, but just over 2 years ago, a widow did the same thing. Dominique Rivera begged our feckless leaders to do something about bail reform, to do something about holding criminals accountable. And it went on deaf ears. It fell on deaf ears.
Yeah, I was watching a Fox News report on this morning. There's been arrests made. We're talking now about people being arrested for murder who have been in and out of jail, charged dozens of times, and they're being released under these bail policies in states like New York, where we've seen these prosecutors that don't take crime seriously when it involves, police officers. So a lot of anger out there. This is something I think the Democratic Party is going to have to face in this election once again. Their attitude towards police, what's going on at the border, maybe talk a little bit more about that shortly, and abortion. The Democrats feel that abortion is one of their big election issues. I was going to mention, we talked about Biden and Transsexual Visibility Day. Just a few weeks ago, Vice President Harris became the first vice president in the United States in history to visit an abortion clinic where babies are being killed. She went up to Minneapolis, visited an abortion clinic there. This is all leading up to, not to mention the economy, to a real problem for the Democratic Party. And they know they're in trouble.
Well, and on the police issue, that can only get worse because as inner cities continue to unravel, because of, as you mentioned, the policies of these many of them Soros-funded anti-police district attorneys under the shadow of no cash bail, all those kinds of things where criminals are being let on the street. As crime continues to go up, as businesses shut their doors because of theft, as violence increases, as people in the inner city continue to feel under siege, that is going to make the police issue, like the border crisis, only get worse for Democrats. And those inner cities are the wellspring of Democratic political hopes. Mm-hmm. They've got to have the inner cities completely in their pocket when it comes to voting, or they don't have a chance to overcome the rural voters, small town voters, so on and so forth. And you're going to start to see a lot of those drain away, the votes, because of the police issue.
You think so?
And I do. And I've saw polls even while we were here on the program talking about the now these are polls. I understand what you're
for what they're worth.
For what they're worth. That black support for Trump and Hispanic support for Trump is growing in those communities. Whether or not they stay home and don't vote at all, or whether they actually pull the lever for Trump, remains to be seen. But it's an unforced error on the part of the Democrats because they chose to support Biden's policies on the border and chose to support the radical wing of the Democratic Party in their calls to defund the police. Those are unforced errors and risk losing votes.
Well, and to your point, on our website, afn.net, put an AP story. This is an AP story up this morning. An Associated Press Nork Center for Public Affairs research poll. Listen to this. This is on growing discontent amongst Democrats for Biden's border crisis. Roughly 2/3 of Americans now disapprove of how Biden is handling border security, including about 4 in 10 Democrats. 55% of black adults and 73% of Hispanic adults who were polled blame Biden for what's going on at the border.
Right.
Oh, yeah. I mean, Nobody's buying Biden's. This is the Republicans and Trump's border problem.
Right.
That's about the dumbest thing I've ever heard tried ever, in politics. I mean, I don't know who sat around the table at the White House going, "Hey, let's try to blame the border on Trump." What y'all got to say? Who think that's a good idea?
Well, isn't it disrespectful to voters? To me, it's as if they really think the American voter is stupid. They'll never figure out what we're doing here. If we just say it's the Republicans' fault, we want to hide funding for Ukraine in this bill,
right?
And Republicans will vote against the border money we want to spend, which isn't really to fix the border. It's just to fast track people into getting in and getting citizenship. But we'll fool these dumb voters into thinking it's Republicans' fault.
I tell you what's going to be interesting to watch outside the presidential race, obviously, this November, is going to be at a city and state level in places like New York, where violent crime is absolutely out of control, running amok because of the social justice warriors and their idea that you don't need to put criminals behind bars. You need to just let them go, let them run free. And this was the prime example, a glaring example, is the story you're talking about. If you didn't hear about it, in New York City last week, a police officer was shot in broad daylight in Queens, I think, on a traffic stop. He walks up to the car, and the fella in the car, did they get into a physical altercation or not? Or he just... Anyway, I remember seeing it, but the guy in the car shot the police officer in the stomach. He had his chest vest on, his what do you call it, bulletproof vest on, but it hit him underneath the vest, penetrated his stomach, and he bled to death. He died.
He was trying to get the driver to exit the vehicle.
He was, but the driver wouldn't. So what happened was he shot him and he killed him. Well, he was arrested. I mean, they knew who he was. They got him. The cops did.
He had 21 prior arrests.
That's what I was going to say. Yes, he has. Then it was learned he had a rap sheet a mile long, 21 prior arrests. Here's my point bringing this up. Do the citizens of New York care or not? There's outrage among the police officer community. There's outrage among, I guess, people who are conservatives, the 17 that live in New York. But among the general public, will there be a response in the voting in New York City, state of New York, for example? This is what my point. I'm asking the question. I don't know the answer. Where they say, enough is enough. This is the top issue. Violent criminals ruining our communities, our towns. They're running free everywhere. They're not being punished. They're not being put in prison. Because here's what I would say. It's the people who are voting who are responsible for the criminals running amok, the violent criminals running amok. So it's a circle of self-destruction. Because you have the voters, let's say New York City, for example. The voters of New York, they vote for Alvin Bragg, for example, a Soros-funded DA, and others there, and they don't believe in putting violent criminals behind bars. Yep. They believe that there's already enough of them behind bars, and so we need to let them out. That's why you hear these turnstile. They violent criminals. They'll arrest them. The cops will arrest them to take them downtown. And then that afternoon, they're free. And they don't even have to post bail. There's no cash bail.
Well, I'm going to answer your question. I don't think it will matter to voters in New York City right now. I mean, we've seen the Michigan governor and the New York governor when we thought Gretchen Whitmer and Michigan, Hochul in New York, when we thought they might be politically damaged by these kinds of spikes in crime, no, they seem to weather it. I don't think now. If you're in the police officer community, if you're in New York City, yes, you're angry because this murderer, the guy who shot the Diller, the police officer, he shouldn't have been on the street. The job of the New York City police officer is so frighteningly dangerous because they are having to stop repetitive lawbreakers, and they don't know who is out on the street when they should be in jail or in prison.
Okay, so you have to conclude, and this is we're speaking the majority of voters in the city and the state of New York. You have to conclude that they agree with George Soros, and they agree with the lax treatment of criminals. They would say, well, I'm sorry the cop got killed, but I don't care that he has 21 arrests,
right.
The criminal. It doesn't bother me. He can have 25 just as long as he doesn't hurt my family. Mm-hmm. I guess is what they would say. They say that with their votes.
Yes.
Because the people who might say, well, I'm outraged at that. Well, they're going to go vote Democrat tomorrow.
And their view of the guy's rap sheet is that he's not guilty of all those crimes, but it's a systemically racist system that is looked for certain individuals to arrest, and that's why he was arrested.
I remember reading a politician, I think this was in Minneapolis, which is basically the same politics as New York City. They're all Democrat. All the officials are. And he said, it may have been the state's attorney general or something. He said, listen, I know that there's going to be a lot of violent crimes committed by repeat offenders, but it's the price we have to pay for social justice.
Right.
That's what he said. So we got too many. What he was saying was, we got too many black men behind bars. We're not going to put any more there. We don't care what they do.
Yeah.
Right. I'm just going to lay it out there. That's the view that these people are taking. And so the community who say, yeah, we support you on that, they're having to deal with the consequences of their votes and their support for that attitude toward violent crime. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And we've seen that over and over again. Portland, Oregon, Seattle, Washington, same attitude towards police officers. And now they cry about crime. You know, these are smart people. You think you would put it together.
You can't.
If you're going to let the bad guys out.
You can't have it both ways.
No.
You can't have it both ways.
But your point about the only time it really seems to matter to voters in these blue cities or blue states is when it directly affects them. You know, we remember the state representative or state senator from Minnesota, the one who was carjacked.
Right.
Remember, she said, well, where are the police? But she was a
defund the police person.
To fund the police person.
And then when it happened to her, she wanted to know where the cops.
Up in arms.
Yeah. It's idiocy is what it is. And as I said, it's almost like the citizens of these places have a death wish, because you start having violent crime run amok, you're not going to get businesses to move in. In fact, they're going to move out. This is happening.
Right.
San Francisco's almost a ghost town now, they say, downtown.
Right.
Because of businesses moving out. People can't sustain the look at all the stores that are closing because of shoplifting.
Right.
In these cities. I mean, that's every day.
And it's other policies too. A lot of these stores closing because the city allows homeless drug use out in public.
That's what happens with progressivism. They get their utopia, and it's ugly. We'll be back in 5 minutes.
The views and opinions expressed in this broadcast may not necessarily reflect those of the American Family Association or American Family Radio.
Faith, family, freedom. American Family Radio.
So I found a dress for the party. Awesome. Not really. I went to try it on, but Emma, there was a man in there. A man? I told customer service, but they said It's our policy. What?
Target allows men into women's restrooms and changing areas. The American Family Association is calling for a boycott of Target until they reverse this misguided policy. Sign the pledge at afa.net.
This is American Family Radio, a listener-supported ministry of the American Family Association.
American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh. The main suspect in the murder of an NYPD officer appears in court. Nate Foy has the latest in New York City.
The Queens District Attorney's Office tells us that Lindy Jones, the man who was driving the car during Officer Jonathan Diller's murder 1 week ago today, will appear in court being held without bail. And again, this comes on the 1 week anniversary of Officer Jonathan Diller's murder. Lindy Jones is facing weapons charges. He's been arrested over a dozen times. Police say Jones illegally parked his car at a bus stop in Far Rockaway, Queens, when his passenger shot and killed Officer Diller. Friends and family laid the 31-year-old officer to rest on Saturday in Long Island. An estimated 10,000 people attended his funeral, including Mayor Eric Adams and, of course, his widow and one-year-old son he leaves behind.
A group of illegal aliens recently stormed part of the U.S. southern border in Texas, ultimately getting involved in altercations with National Guard members. Casey Stiegel has the latest on the situation from El Paso, Texas.
Some 700 soldiers have been surged to El Paso since this happened. All this as we continue watching a new migrant caravan marching north towards the United States. The group, about 2,000 in size, still remains deep in southern Mexico, so it's unclear when and where they will actually arrive, although senior border officials tell us the cartels will likely strategically break up the caravan as it gets closer and closer to our border, and then send smaller groups to multiple locations for them to eventually cross.
Joe Biden's border crisis continues, and the administration is pressured by Mexico to deliver more aid to the country. Tennessee Senator Marsha Blackburn says the Mexican president is taking advantage of Joe Biden.
We know for a fact he would never have conducted himself that way with President Donald Trump. And we know that basically he is threatening the U.S. and saying, hey, send us the money or the migrants are going to keep coming.
There's a growing rift between the U.S. and Israel as IDF forces prepare for a military operation in southern Gaza. Florida Republican Senator Rick Scott says the Biden administration needs to change their tune and start supporting Israel.
I want the Biden administration to start talking about the fact we have American families been held hostage in Gaza by Hamas, and we have Israeli families. What is Biden doing to get those out?
It has been 50 years since the 1974 super outbreak of tornadoes. As Robert Thornton reports, the meteorological community has advanced since then, especially the National Weather Service.
The April 3rd and 4th, 1974 super outbreak of tornadoes affected 13 states across the eastern U.S., from the Great Lakes region all the way to the Deep South, according to the National Weather Service. In all, 148 tornadoes were documented, with 335 people being killed. Experts in meteorology believe the event was a catalyst for positive changes in the National Weather Service, which bears the responsibility of weather watches and warnings, among other things. Ken Graham, director of the National Weather Service, appeared on the Weather Brains podcast. He said NOAA Weather Radio was originally designed for marine interests, but after the super outbreak, it was more widely used.
I mean, you think about kicking off modernization. Wow, we need to detect tornadoes better on radar. How do we do that? Maybe we should have a Doppler. Right? The initial conversations, the development of the next radar, the Doppler radar, the WSR-88D Doppler, being able to see winds headed towards and away from the radar.
He said the Weather Service wasn't the only entity that benefited.
Reshaped emergency management and how we use the emergency broadcast system to be able to get information out back then on your television, eventually leading to, the things that we have today on our phones. Just making sure we could get those warnings out to the locals. For that, a lot of emergency management was civil defense and really looking at the Cold War.
I'm Robert Thornton.
Alex Murdaugh has been sentenced to 40 years in federal prison for stealing from clients and his law firm. The 55-year-old disbarred attorney is already serving a life sentence without parole in a state prison for killing his wife and son. For American Family News, I'm Rusty Pugh.
So I just joined 1 Million Moms. But I know I should have done it a few years ago when you sent your email about the trash in the media, but it just didn't seem to be worth it then. So what changed? Oh my goodness, have you seen that preview? It's pornographic.
Media isn't going to get better until concerned consumers get involved. 1 Million Moms has been calling on us to do just that for 14 years, with many successes along the way. When you see something, say something at 1millionmoms.com. That's 1millionmoms.com.
Today's Issues continues on AFR with your host, Tim Wildman, president of the American Family Association.
Hey, welcome back, everybody, to today's Issues on the American Family Radio Network. We got 24 and a half more minutes to go on this program. Tim Wildman with Ed Vitagliano, and we hope you had a wonderful Easter weekend celebration at your church and with your family. And joining us now in studio is Steve Paisley Jordal.
Good morning.
Hey,
everybody.
Got to have Steve back. You were out with knee surgery?
Yeah, 2 weeks.
Or so you said.
2 weeks ago yesterday, yes, so I said.
Yeah.
He's shown me the scar.
Oh,
He's
so
shown
he
me.
really did have knee surgery?
Yes.
Okay.
Either that or he beat his leg
mercilessly
to cover up him skipping work.
Which ended up costing me vacation day, so I don't know what that would have what good that would have done.
Right.
No, I had total knee replacement, and I'm on the mend. At times it's fairly uncomfortable. I sent a note in with you. You said you read this to people. You said, what's my pain level? It's from 2 to, I said spinal tap. I don't know that many people got that reference. So
Spinal Tap?
Spinal Tap.
Like the movie?
Like the movie.
Oh, I didn't know. I thought you were talking about the pain.
Right.
Of
No. Okay. So there is the Spinal Tap.
This is Spinal Tap is the movie.
This is Spinal Tap, and the reason that I said from 2 to Spinal Tap is because the Spinal Tap, one of the shticks there is that all their amps went up to 11.
Oh.
They didn't just go to 10. They went to 11.
I've never seen the movie, so I was at a disadvantage.
Yes.
I thought you were talking about from 2 to the pain of a spinal tap.
I've never had a spinal tap, so I wouldn't know, but it does feel like about an 11 on a scale of 1 to 10 sometimes.
So total knee replacement.
Yeah.
But how many days ago was that?
It was a week ago Tuesday. 2 weeks ago tomorrow.
Yeah. Yeah, well, it's good to have you back.
Thank you. It's great to be back.
You're walking around. It's a slow process. They probably tell you 6 months to a year.
It depends on what I want to do. I mean, to go sprinting, probably you're right. But if I'm still in pain and significant pain after 2 months, we're going to go back and see if they missed something, I think.
They had pieces left on
That's
the
what
table.
they told you?
At a nut and bolt.
Yeah,
No.
come back in a couple months. We'll see if we did a good job or not.
No,
we really
that's
don't
not
know
what they
at this
told me.
point.
But they told me to expect significant pain.
But you're going to get a bill anyway.
Yes, you will. We won't.
Whether we did a good job or not,
that's not
you're getting the
something
bill.
We'll forget. We won't forget the bill.
So what'd they say? What'd they say,
They
Steve?
said I could be in significant pain and swelling and all that kind for up to 2 months, I think, or maybe even more.
Right.
But I'm pushing it a little bit.
Yeah, because you were supposed to stay out for 3 weeks.
We're open to 3. I was open to 3 weeks. I wanted to come back in 2. I happen to have some pain meds that are very effective at home, but not here.
They don't make you loopy, do they?
That's why you
you're
take
not,
them at home.
You're not going to start talking crazy talk on the show here, right?
Well, no, because I'm not. I have none of those particular meds on board at the moment.
Okay.
But you might not want to see me around dinner time tonight.
Boy, Steve was a lot of fun tonight at dinner, wasn't he?
Well, all right. Well, we're happy that it was a success.
Yes.
And
thank you.
I know everybody who has knee trouble, and has to have a knee replacement. It's really, because my wife Allison had one a year and a half ago. It's really hard at first, and at first I mean for, the first 6 weeks, and then 3 months, and then you progressively get better. That's the idea, and then 6 months to a year post knee surgery. Then you're going to be thankful that you did it, because you have a new life.
Right. I can already feel that the pain that I was having in the knee, in the joint, where the meniscus was worn away and it was bone on bone, you can kind of tell that kind of pain is gone.
Yeah.
Now it's just pain because, well, they stabbed me in my knee about a dozen times 2 weeks ago. So, and may I, if I could, just want to thank everybody out there that prayed for me, because I know that many of you did. I heard from many of you. Thank you for chiming in and giving me encouragement and everything. I so appreciate our listeners. They're just kind people.
And for those of you who emailed us and said, we're glad Steve's not on the air, shame on you. That was just...
You can go ahead and listen from...
That was uncalled for.
You go ahead and listen from 1 to 2 in the afternoon. I'm never on the air then, so...
Nobody did that, as far as I know. Everyone, you have a lot of fans out there, Steve.
In the words of the Welcome Back Cotter theme song, welcome back. Welcome back, welcome back, welcome back. All right, listen, joining us in studio also, besides Steve Paisley Jordal, is our own John Riley. John Plain Shirt Riley. And he's joining us in studio. John is just got back from Israel. John's heard with J.J. Jasper in the mornings on our music side, on our morning music side here on American Family Radio. John, you're one of the longest tenured staff member here, I think. How long have you been on with us?
32, almost 33 years. Yes, sir. And I love it.
That's half my life.
There's a gold watch in it for you somewhere. I know
That's right.
Wow, would it have been 91? Somewhere in there?
That's right.
Because we started American Family Radio in 1991, so you would have come on then.
Yep.
You and your family lived in, you hail from Michigan, but you worked in Minnesota, true?
That's true. That's very true.
So you've lived in 3M states.
I did. My wife said...
But you never worked for 3M. See what I did there, Ed?
I saw it.
Yeah. You moved from...
I saw it coming from pretty far down the road.
Michigan to Minnesota to Mississippi.
That's right.
And so you moved from snow blizzards to tornado warnings, right?
That's true.
Everywhere you go, you got something to deal with, huh?
Right.
All right, John, you have family in Israel. You've been to Israel many times, right?
Right. That's correct.
So this time was different, though. You went over during the middle of a hot war.
Right.
Right. What was your purpose in going?
I first had to convince my wife to come along with me, and then when that happened, that was good. But my purpose on going this time was to do a lot of interviews with a lot of people there in Israel during this very difficult time there in the land.
So take us through your trip. You land in Tel Aviv.
That's right.
And then you do what?
Rest a little bit. Next day, I hit it hard. I went up into just above the Sea of Galilee to a small town called Katzrin. I interviewed an IDF major.
IDF being, what's that stand for?
Israeli Defense Forces. So I got a sense of what's happening up in the north. And
why were they, excuse me for interrupting you here along the way, but why were they willing to talk to you? Because they don't want to give away Army secrets. So why were they talking to you?
Well, I spoke to a lot of Israeli defense officials. The reason is because there's so much misinformation out there about what's going on there in the land of Israel. So, they really want to go to outlets, especially that are going to be honest about
in the U.S. in particular, right?
Yeah, you got that right.
They want to help because the U.S. has always been supportive of Israel, but that's been challenged now.
Yeah.
By these far lefties in our country.
Right.
And not just far lefties, some others who, say, well, we shouldn't be involved in that. We shouldn't be supporting Israel. So these people that you talk to, defense people inside Israel, wanted to get to communicate to Americans, especially to evangelical Christians. Anyway, that's the reason they did these interviews with you, I guess.
That's right.
So then where did you go after that?
We could spend 2 hours about, all the different places that I went to. But just to give you a broad perspective, I met with a lot of security people in Israel. I actually had a chance to interact with Israelis there to kind of get a sense of how they were feeling.
What do they think, generally speaking?
There's
been protests the last couple of days.
Yeah, and on that note, guys, it's very interesting. As I was leaving the country on Saturday, there was a lot of major protest against the government. And of course, before the war, there was a lot of that going on, but then it's kicking up again.
Because why?
I think they want to just get Netanyahu out of there. At least that's the left side there in Israel. That was my sense, being there in Israel. And then, of course, you got a lot of them saying, hey, bring the hostages home, as if, Netanyahu can just magically click his fingers and get all the hostages back. And I think there's like 134, but everybody I've talked
There's
to...
some Americans in there, too, in that hostage list.
But a lot of them are dead. I mean, I heard that over and over again, that a lot of these hostages are dead, maybe 30, 40 of them. So
because they've been there 6 months now. I mean, how many of them died in the interim?
That's
The conditions that they were living under.
Yes, sir.
If they weren't killed already.
Yep.
And so, so give us, what do you think's going to, go ahead.
I just want to ask a question because after after we started this segment, Fred Jackson came in and handed a piece of paper to us. And this is what it says. Syria says an Israeli airstrike has destroyed Iran's consulate building in Damascus, killing or wounding all inside. Now, during the break, before we came in here, I was talking to you about this, and you said that Israel does this fairly often in Syria.
But this report that you're sharing, saying that, and which embassy was this? This
is Iran's consulate building in Damascus.
That's major. If this is
yes, and let me before John comments on that, let me explain to people just so you have a perspective on geography. Okay, Syria. Here's the headline Ed was reading, which Fred brought into us. This is breaking news. Syria says an Israeli airstrike has destroyed Iran's consulate building in Damascus, killing and wounding all inside. So Syria borders Israel on the northeast side, a border country. So, but Syria is basically a hotbed for Islamic terrorists, right?
That's right.
Okay, so
100%.
So Israel has to be strong defensively on that all around them, bordering. Probably have the friendliest relationship with Jordan. But so Iran has a diplomatic place within Damascus, a town in Syria, mentioned in the Bible, right?
Right.
Well, so this could up the ante some.
So just breaking news as well here. The Reuters news agency is reporting that Mohammad Reza Zahedi was killed in the attack. Likely, he's the Iranian Guards Quds force leader in Lebanon and Syria. He was likely the target, the reason they went in and got this. So an Iranian leader was killed in this airstrike. So just update that there.
I will say this is a big deal. Now, and going back to what you were talking about, Ed, Israel, for the last many, many years, 2-3 years, maybe even more, has had the shadow war against Iran. Okay, so they are constantly having attacks in Iran on people that are associated with...
Iran?
Not Iran, I'm sorry, in Syria. Yes, constantly having attacks in Syria with people associated with Iran, whether they're Revolutionary Guards or whoever. So they do that a lot. You hear about that a lot. But a embassy this is the first time I've ever heard that this could be something very, very major.
This what tells me this. Israel's in a do-or-die situation. That's the way they view this. Maybe you could argue they always are, every day, all day, every year. That's true, but if the saying is that if Israel makes a mistake, then they get condemned. But if Israel doesn't take a chance and defend itself, Israel doesn't exist. I didn't phrase that right, but you've heard that saying before. So Israel has to be on the defensive all the way around, and because they've got Muslim terrorists all surrounding them, so they have to be strong. Now, so we'll see what happens with this particular story. But you're right. Now Israel has fired into Syria before
many times
to take out missiles or take out,
and not just missiles, Tim. They have taken out some very high-level Revolutionary Guard people as well. But sometimes that's drones, sometimes that's buildings.
But this is an embassy.
That's big.
Iranian
that's
embassy.
Huge.
So the idea, what Israel would tell you, is the Iranians are working inside Damascus try to plot their attack plans against Israel. So this is in response to that, or preemptive, I guess you could say.
And they use it to feed Syria. You're using Syria to feed weapons into Hezbollah and then some of the other areas that border Israel.
Why do you think this is, John? What's the hate? Why the hatred for the Jews?
Well, I've asked that question over and over, and the only thing I can say is that, it's a spiritual warfare. That you look at the Jewish people, and they stand for light and even the word of God and goodness.
But they have a democracy there too, a representative form of government. The Arabs/Muslims inside Israel get to participate in the Knesset. They get to they get to participate in everyday life for the most part. Maybe not the people in Gaza, but the other Palestinians who live around Israel. We all have friends, who are of that, and I don't.
Yeah.
I remember a survey about 3 years ago. I mentioned this before. A survey of Arabs who live inside Israel, which is officially a Jewish state, and they were asked, "Do you want to live in Israel, or do you want to live in a Muslim-dominated country, an Arab country?" And they said, "We want to live in Israel." The majority of them said, "We want to live in Israel." Israel is mostly it's a very modern country. Obviously, it's got ancient history, unparalleled biblical history, that sites you can go to, but it's a modern country it's a Western style living way of life for the most part, and they have elections, but they have to be totally on guard defensively, because especially the enemy is in Iran. And who inexplicably hate the Jews too. I've said before, it really, outside of a spiritual answer to the hatred for the Jews going back forever, you have to say to yourself, why does Iran hate the Jews?
Iran, or they're not Arab. Iran, the people in Iran are basically Caucasian.
Well, descendants of
which is why they're set apart from all the other Arab countries around them. And your question being, why would a country that has no religious? Well, there are religious.
They're Persian, right?
Persian, right?
Yeah, they're Persian. But yes, to my point is that Iran and Israel, they have no border argument, right?
Nope.
They have no history of being at war with one another, fighting over land or territory. So you say, why does a country 1,000 miles away just obsess over Israel? And they obsess over the U.S. too. Why don't they just be happy that they're having life in Iran? And why are they always saying death to Israel? Well, because you have to say it's spiritual. They just hate the Jews because
God loves them. God loves the Jews.
And I guess they say Allah tells them to hate the Jews.
Right.
Can you explain it? To me, it's almost like, I've said this before, it's like the U.S., us being around and Argentina just hating our guts. Why?
Right.
Just because they hate Americans. Death to America, says
Right.
the Argentinians. And you go, why? We don't have a border dispute. We're not fighting over, why? Just because they're Americans, they need to die. That's basically what it's about, seems to me. Because even if you were to say it's a Muslim-Jew thing, Iranians are a different branch of Islam. They're Shia. Okay? The Palestinians are Sunni. Okay? So even the Sunnis and Shias basically hate each other. I mean, that's why the Saudis don't work with. That's why they hate the Iranians for the most part. They're at odds with one another. So anyway, it's a bottom line. This is a biblical, spiritual hatred for the Jews that's inexplicable. Outside of that, in my opinion.
Yeah. No, I think it is clearly spiritual.
What about the Jews controlling the world argument?
What?
Well, that's what some people, Hitler and others, that's what
I
they
think
would.
that's
the
nonsense.
Jews control
I
the
think
banks. Jews control the media.
Yeah, that's been I personally, I think that is a demonic instigated tactic to use against the Jews, because you got to have some argument for hating them if you're in the West. Let's say you're not even the Muslims have a number of different reasons. Their own religion forbids territory that has been controlled and dedicated to Islam, that it is forbidden to leave Islam. That's why they say that land, I don't care who had it first or whatever, it was under the control of Islam. And the fact that the West was stronger than we were after World War I, World War II, to force us to after World War I, the Balfour Declaration to allow Jews to go back there, and then 1948 after World War II, the United Nations establishes the nation of Israel. Muslims don't care, and it doesn't matter that the Shia and the Sunni are at odds. They all agree that land belongs to Islam. But if you're in the West, if you're in Europe and you hate the Jews, you got to have some reason. And this libel, this argument that the Jews, because many times in Europeans' history, they were prosperous. You say they control the world. They control the banks. And if you're in Germany between the two world wars and Hitler takes advantage of the fact that the economy was in shambles, who do we blame? We're going to blame the Jews.
Because they control the banks.
Because they control the banks. And Karl Marx was partly Jewish, so the Nazis hated the communists. And it was believed that communism was part of the Jewish plot.
Hey, John, I got a question for you. How's Benjamin Netanyahu doing in country?
It's interesting. I talked to a lot of Israelis, and I don't think there's a lot of Israelis, at least the people that I spoke to, and I'm talking in general here, that like Netanyahu for some reason. Now, you put in one box the war, and they're supporting the war. But then on the political side, we don't want Netanyahu anymore. He served a long time, and we're just ready for a change. And maybe that's a left change. I don't know. But so it's a very interesting dynamic that's going on in Israel. Majority of Israel supporting, the war. But then on the other side, not so much. And then as I was leaving the country, this massive protest against the government, that's kind of rising up again there as it was before the war. So it's interesting. Yeah.
Well, and I made the point during the first hour, 9.5 million population, Israel. You can get thousands of people to protest, and it looks like the whole country
that's true.
is opposed to
Netanyahu
right. and wants this war to end. And Tim's point also earlier, you got people who are concerned about those hostages. I would be if it was one of my children or one of my grandchildren being held hostage.
Well, if you're in the place of the family and you have a family who have as a hostage, and we're on 6 months now, and you're probably being told by the government day after day after day, we're doing everything we can. Well, you get frustrated and exhausted with those answers, and
Right.
you don't care about the overall. You don't see it from a 30,000-foot war effort. You see it down on the ground. I want my mom back.
Right.
I want my daughter back, and I'm tired of hearing excuses. You need to do what you need to do to get them back. That's what you're thinking. You know what I'm saying? All right, John. Well, glad you're back safe and sound, and the Bible tells us to pray.
Amen. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem. Do it.
Amen.
Do it.
On behalf of American Family News, also thank you, because you fed us a whole lot of stuff.
Thank you. Thank you.
Steve, good to have you back.
My pleasure. Really great to be back.
Maybe we'll let you talk a little more tomorrow.
I've had my say. It's all
Steve,
good.
I was going to go for a little jog around the block, Steve.
I'll watch you. I'll cheer you on.
Okay, see if we can do that. Ed, thank you.
Absolutely.
I want to thank Fred Jackson and Brent Creeley, our producer, and thank you folks for listening to American Family Radio. Hope you have a wonderful Monday. We'll see you back here tomorrow.
We live in a day when America's families are under attack like never before.
Buddy Smith, Senior Vice President of the